Let's dig in on Motorpsycho Nightmare, the 7th song from Another Side of Bob Dylan. This is definitely one of Dylan's fun little throwaway songs. I don't think he's ever played it live. And it's not an overly long song, appropriate given the just toss away humorous nature of this thing, 4 minutes and 34 seconds, but it is not a short song in terms of content, not at all. It has 563 words. By way of comparison, the 8-minute plus Stairway to Heaven by, of course, Led Zeppelin has 351 words only. Back to our song, it has 9 stanzas of 12 lines each. And as is so often the case at this point in Dylan's career and really overall, it eschews normal songwriting convention. There's no chorus here. We're showing Dylan on a motorcycle, not the only image like that I'm going to use, because obviously the lead-off term in the song title, Motorpsycho, is a play on motorcycle. And that is classic Dylan right there, playing with the language. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. They're so close together, and there's some jokes or nightmarish visions or whatnot to draw from that. But had anybody ever done that before? I'm not sure. Motorcycle, motorpsycho, a psycho on a motorcycle. It's a fun little bit of wordplay. Interestingly, the movie Motorpsycho came out 1 year after this album was released. There's no direct evidence that this uses Dylan's term or took inspiration from it, I should say, but Russ Meyer, the filmmaker here, who became more famous for his next movie, a very similar film, Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, one of the most unforgettable movie titles of all time. Anyway, I do know that he had a different working title for the movie until it came out, when the title was changed for the release to Motorpsycho. So this could be a surprise effect elsewhere in pop culture of the Dylan song. And as far as I could tell from the research I did for this video, you are listening to the first person to ever make this observation. It's pretty clear from the 2 images we've seen thus far about this movie that buxom women were a part of it, and that actually plays back into the song. Because the song name checks the movie La Dolce Vita, very influential film by Fellini, of course, from a few years, 4 years before Dylan composed his song. And we see the very vivacious Anita Ekberg on the movie poster here. She, by the way, of course, previously name-checked by Dylan on his last album. Here she is from La Dolce Vita, and obviously her voluptuous nature was kind of a calling card for our actress. And Dylan was clearly a fan, boy, he wasn't alone, of male moviegoers back then either. But let's put a pin in that because it will be important. Back to the album and its sequencing, especially, you'll notice that this song comes just 2 spots after I Shall Be Free number 10, which thematically is a very different song, but is definitely part of this goofy song lineage. So we're going from here, the one we're talking about today, back to I Shall Be Free number 10, which of course reminds us purposely of I Shall Be Free from the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan. That not just being the album closer, but the song in which Anita Ekberg appears, as seen here. So again, with today's focus, we're really talking about this strain of Dylan's songwriting where he's just really having fun. Doesn't mean he isn't being clever, he is. He's making some commentary, he's doing some interesting creative things that we're about to talk about, but most of all, he's having fun. So what is he doing? As always, it's best to kind of surmise a Dylan song by understanding the confluence of disparate influences that he somehow seized upon and threw into a blender. So, part 1, the trope of the traveling salesman. So many of the existing commentaries on this song assume that Dylan's character, the narrator, is a traveling salesman. That is not an accurate assumption. We have no evidence of that in the song itself, but the song does play on this well-known facet of bygone American life, the traveling salesman who would just show up at a door. But it's just a dash of that. What it mainly is, the main ingredients are the old joke, or really joke series, the entire trope about the farmer's daughter. It's this old tried and true convention about how an outsider shows up at a farm and there's a crusty old farmer there with a young, gorgeous daughter. There's mainstream movies made on this. This is decades. These two images we're seeing, these two posters, decades before the song, Dylan's song. So movies made about it, a whole joke series that go from, fairly safe to explicit. It's just this long-running mainstream kink kind of obsession in the American psyche. Kind of a forbidden fruit thing, but also this play on the expectation where it's a very conservative household and they're looking at the interloper with suspicion, like, I'll let you stay here the night because you need a place to stay and you're on the road, but you better not go near my daughter. But then, as it turns out, she's actually more than willing. So you've got that, and if that's one main ingredient, what's the other? What are the two predominant ingredients? Well, if you're Bob Dylan and nobody else ever, then it's the Alfred Hitchcock classic Psycho. And this is really interesting, in fact. There's a lot more similarities than it seems here. We can, in retrospect, see how Dylan kind of seized upon this juxtaposition. There's a very strong sexual subtext, but a subtle one, right, in the movie Psycho. And in the movie, the gender roles are reversed. It's a woman who shows up at a place where a man and his mother, instead of a daughter and her father, live. And then there's also the violence tie-in between both of these influences, because part of the joke with the farmer's daughter thing is that the farmer is going to kill the visiting man if he finds, him in bed with the daughter. He's gonna kill the young man with his shotgun. But in the movie Psycho, there's an actual killing, of course. Most of the farmer's daughter's jokes don't end in death. They usually end with the guy getting away. But it's not the father, but the mother, sort of, in Psycho, who kills the visitor. So you have the parental authority figure who wants to protect their adult child from the sexual liberation that this visitor, willingly or unwillingly, in the case of this movie here, represents, even to the point of killing, or at least wanting to kill or trying to kill said visitor. And then you have all the gender reversal stuff that I talked about, which, as a reminder, covers all three principal characters, not just the two young ones. So again, going to the genesis of the song, it's actually fascinating, and there's so many more layers there to peel back than people think. And I think if you go online and read all the analysis you can find, the existing analysis on the song, you're not going to hear any mention of this. And this wasn't just some arbitrary, weird mashup by Dylan of Psycho and the Farmer's Daughter joke. What he did is based on a far more interesting and penetrating piece of insight by him, even if it was just a purely intuitive one. People, even dedicated fans and writers about Dylan, make the mistake of treating his light songs lightly. It's still a light song, but doesn't mean that there aren't tremendous depths to be plumbed through if you want to understand what he actually did. Yeah, I'm obviously a huge fan, but yeah, he's just that brilliant. And it's why he's the greatest songwriter of all time. And if you're Dylan, running off on this little lark here, that's still not enough, so we have to throw in some politics, and that's why I'm showing a map related to the Cuban Missile Crisis. The anti-communist scare, the scare about communists being right there in Cuba, that comes into the song as well. But let's see how that all unfolds by working our way through the song. First stanza, we do not need to dwell on overly long. It's pretty simple. The narrator shows up at the farmhouse door, needs a place to stay, and as you see at the end here, the farmer opens the door and sticks a gun into our protagonist's guts. Next stanza, the farmer accuses him of being the traveling salesman that I have heard about. Dylan responds, I said, no, I'm a doctor and it's true, I'm a clean-cut kid, and I've been to college too. Topical matters being lightly touched on now because we've got kind of the generation gap, the hippie generation versus the clean-cut crowd, who would of course be much more welcome by this conservative farmer, so Dylan pretends to be something he's not. And this is what I was talking about earlier. He's not a traveling salesman, and I don't think it's just that he's saying I'm not, it's that he's literally not. He's just a guy looking for a place to stay. Next stanza, we get into the farmer's daughter trope territory. Then comes in his daughter, whose name was Rita. She looked like she stepped out of the Dolce Vita. We're thereby invited not just to think about the beautiful women in that movie in general, but I think Anita Ekberg in particular. Dylan's character immediately tries to settle things with the father so that he can stay now that he's seen the daughter. He already wanted to stay there, he just needed a place to crash, but that really seals the deal. Part of Dylan trying to ingratiate himself with the farmer is complimenting the farm. The farmer asks, well, what does a doctor know about farms? And then Dylan makes a curious remark. I was born at the bottom of a wishing well, this being some way of assuring the farmer that, I come from the same roots you do, something like that. I looked, I think there's a possible Shakespearean reference, but I won't go into details because that seems tenuous. And I thought for sure, initially, this would tie back to some kind of folkloric fairy tale note, but I can't find anything like that. Anyone who has a clue as to what this line is about, please add that to the comments. The suspicious farmer is won over by that and by the fact, top of the next stanza, that Dylan's character has dirt under his fingernails, so again, something about humble roots. I'm definitely guessing there. The line about 10,000 miles could be a reference to this old sea shanty, which Dylan certainly knew. And anyway, now we get to the warning part. Okay, you can stay here, and you go to sleep right now, that you don't touch my daughter and in the morning milk the cow. There's more than one dirty joke or potential dirty joke in this song. Don't touch my daughter and in the morning milk the cow. Remember, the daughter is supposed to look like Anita Ekberg, a Swedish actress with a very, let's say, Swedish figure. I think those last two lines might be a play on, hey, you're allowed to milk the cow, but you can't milk something else. And if this seems like a stretch, just remember that in Thunder on the Mountain, written decades later, Dylan clearly uses this milking metaphor in a sexual context when he confesses, I've sucked the milk out of 1,000 cows. I mean, the very next line includes a pork chop. I've got the pork chop, she's got the pie. There's no ambiguity here. We know what he's talking about. The deal has been struck, and now we move to middle of the night. Let's read this whole stanza because it's really pivotal. I was sleeping like a rat when I heard something jerkin'. There stood Rita looking just like Tony Perkins. Is jerkin' a sexual reference? Probably. And Rita, that helps with the rhyme because she looks just like Tony Perkins, as in Anthony Perkins, the actor who played Norman Bates. Quite a change in the character there, from looking like Anita Ekberg to Tony Perkins. She said, would you like to take a shower? So obvious Psycho reference now, falling right on the heels of the Anthony Perkins name drop. I'll show you to the door. I said, oh no, I've been through this movie before. So again, very obvious movie. Perkins, The Shower, and Psycho was such a famous movie. This was obvious stuff to the people listening to the song at the time. Well, if they noticed this, but especially with the actor's name. Come on. I knew I had to split, but I didn't know how, when she said, would you like to take that shower now? And this is really fun and strange. So is it that he's afraid Rita will kill him in the shower? Very easy to miss how much of the content in this song is psychosexual in nature. And that line about jerkin', again, that was no mistake. Something that the film alludes to, but obviously doesn't make very explicit regarding Norman Bates' obsession with the visitor. Our protagonist is oddly honorable. He was, going along with the farmer's daughter's convention, very happy to try to hook up with the daughter if he can, despite his promise not to. And yet he feels he can't leave, even though now he really wants to, because he promised he would milk the cows. So let's read. Well, I couldn't leave unless the old man chased me out, because I'd already promised that I'd milk his cows. I had to say something to strike him very weird. So I yelled out, I like Fidel Castro and his beard. Rita looked offended, but she got out of the way as he came charging down the stairs, saying, what's that I heard you say? Let's just jump into the next stanza. I said, I like Fidel Castro, I think you heard me right, and ducked as he swung at me with all his might. Rita mumbled something about her mother on the hill. Yet another Psycho reference, because Norman Bates, his mother, even though she's dead, and that motel is up on a hill. Back to the lyrics. As his fist hit the icebox, he said he's going to kill me if I don't get out of the door in 2 seconds flat. You unpatriotic, rotten doctor, commie rat. And now, as you of course can tell, we are into the Cold War Fidel Castro side of things that we talked about earlier when we were listing out the ingredients in the song. A couple of fun little touches. You'll notice he's accused of being a rat, right? You rotten doctor, commie rat. And earlier, he was sleeping like a rat. And that's a way of illustrating that Dylan's character has been unmasked, not as a communist. He probably isn't one and really doesn't care about Fidel Castro. He's just saying that to get away, but the fact that the farmer is no longer fooled. Well, he threw a Reader's Digest at my head and I did run. Anybody old enough, like me, certainly remembers Reader's Digest. There's talk in some of the other commentaries on the song about how this is a statement about the low intellect of the farmer in typical American households. I don't necessarily see that. I think it's just that this was a very typical publication that would be sitting there. And I'd like to see something corroborating that, or at least hinting at it in the lyrics, and there's nothing like that. Observation by somebody from the website Genius, Genius Lyrics, where you comment on songs. There's not much in there when it comes to this song at all, but one point someone made is a good one. Notice that the line about Castro's beard isn't just a way of saying, hey, I'm a commie, so that the dad will chase him out, but it's a nice juxtaposition to the earlier claim that the character is a clean-cut kid. Dylan's character gets away, and we're at the final stanza. Well, I don't figure I'll be back there for a spell, even though Rita moved away and got a job at a motel. Motel, get it? He still waits for me, constant on the sly. He wants to turn me into the FBI. So again, one of the threads in the song is this kind of talking John Birch paranoid blues, anti-communism scare, satire. Me, I romp and stomp, thankful as I romp. Without freedom of speech, I might be in the swamp. So Dylan manages to get in yet another Psycho reference because In the Swamp references the end of that movie. But what that also does is reinforce the politics commentary side of the song, which is there even though it's here for humor. I say that, but at the same time I really do think it's actual, meaningful satire. And this is not a very political song, though, of course, humorous or not. What this is mostly about, in my opinion, is that amazing symmetry that he notes between the old farmer's daughter's joke, or jokes, that scenario, and the movie Psycho. I'll throw in a dash of Cold War paranoia and just a tiny little sprinkle of Anita Ekberg and La Dolce Vita. Lastly, something really interesting about this song is completely accidental, and that's how accidentally prophetic it is. Motorpsycho Nightmare, Motorpsycho being a play on motorcycle. And of course, in a few years, Dylan would go through a real-life motorcycle nightmare with his famous accident. Motorpsycho Nightmare, not a song that's going to be remembered as one of Dylan's better tunes, but that does not mean there aren't several points of interest in there on top of just the enjoyable humor of the song. Thanks for watching the video. Bye.